Welcome to another episode of Step by Step Talks. I'm your host, Rohini Kapoor, and today we have a very special person who has spent many years in the insurance industry. The topic we're discussing today is of very big importance to a lot of people. When I was talking to Rona Connolly a few weeks ago, she explained to me and went through some statistics with me that really blew me over. We're going to discuss the phenomenon of neglected and abandoned life insurance policyholders in Canada. And when I heard the stats that Rona had to share with us, I was shocked. Rona, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our guests and tell us everything that you're doing, including the I think it's the charitable foundation that you're opening. Um, Yeah, and I'd like you to discuss that as well, because I think this is going to be an eye-opener not only for policyholders, but also for insurance companies. Welcome, Rona.
Rohini, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for the invitation to share. I've had the good fortune to be one of the first women in Canada to enter the financial services industry and have spent the last 47 years as an insurance professional in a variety of different capacities as the industry evolved. I have been part of the industry evolution, starting with Sun Life Assurance Company of Canada in Victoria, when at that time there were literally advisors working for one primary insurance company offering solutions that don't even exist today, and some that were leading the charge, such as our RSPs, for example. And then in the 80s, the brokerage industry evolved and came into play. And as a result, there is a significant gap in the servicing of individuals who have bought policies in the last almost 5 decades I've been in the industry, who have never heard from an advisor since, who own a policy that was issued by a company that no longer exists in Canada because of a merger or an acquisition. And I started the industry where my manager gave me 50 orphan policyholders. And for those who may not know what an orphan is an individual who has a policy where the advisor may have left the industry for whatever reason, or the policy is no longer sold and the insurance company kept those closed books, as they're called, out of sight, out of mind, out of servicing. And you know, the insurance industry in Canada, Rohini, is older than Canada. And
Yeah.
of the millions of policyholders that exist in Canada today, it's projected with my research that about 40% of them are deemed orphaned, as you said at the beginning of this episode, neglected and abandoned. So I decided to, as part of my legacy in the industry, to focus on helping advisors and consumer awareness to be elevated around this issue, because there is no regulatory governance around ongoing service in our industry yet. So I've
I know.
decided to focus on building a network to create a nonprofit that would address the rights of orphan policyholders in Canada, called Insure Justice. We're just beginning.
That is amazing. I mean, when you shared the statistic with me that every 3 years there's a strong possibility that the policyholder will become orphaned, and having no legislation in Canada, there will be no ongoing service for that policy. So the original policyholder or the original advisor who sold the policy leaves the industry or moves on or whatever, the client is left with no one.
Correct.
Because typically these orphan policies are not passed on to other advisors.
Not necessarily. And you know, it's interesting, Rohini, I was presenting at an advocacy, the National Association for Financial Advisors, individuals in the industry in Victoria yesterday. And there was a presenter talking about purchasing books of insurance business. I mean, isn't it interesting that because of the fact that two things, because of the fact there's no ongoing service and there isn't an advisor assigned, because advisors are getting older, they're leaving the industry, or they've passed away, And the industry's so different now that there isn't a junior person to come along and take over this book of business. They don't even understand what this book of business is about, because most of these policies they don't even offer. They have no knowledge of it. It takes experience to understand how these older policies work. And many of them are seeking new sales opportunities. So therefore, this whole idea of service is foreign to them, because there's no expectation that when a new policy goes into effect, that it is a right of a policyholder to understand that contract and to understand where there are features and benefits that they can access in the future. I call those the promises to pay. It's not just the death benefit. There are many unique features built into policies that have cash values, policies that have variable rates of return, policies that cover a person in the event of critical illness or a disability. So let's look at the environment. A new individual comes into the industry today, joins a brokerage firm, and maybe they last 3 years. The chance that those individuals don't survive in the industry is so huge within 3 years. So what happens to that client? They don't have anyone to look after them.
They
They don't
typically
have
get
anyone
tossed
to reach
around.
out every year. They just either get passed around or forgotten.
Well, it's amazing, you know. In my career, and I'm within the business for over 3 decades. I went through acquisitions and mergers, you know, from Metropolitan Life to Clerica to Sun Life to Freedom 55 to London Life. I could go on and on. So just in the 3 decades that I was in, I know a little bit over, I was in the industry. I saw so many changes and policies being transferred. Now, when I was the managing director of Desjardins, finally, that was my last decade that I worked with them. I mean, we had policies from Imperial Life that I could not even understand, right? And they were orphans, but we had to come to know what they were. And some of them were gold mines, to be honest, right?
Well, Rohini, you raise a really good point, because as you said, you look at these policies that aren't sold anymore, and maybe the client has also lost the policy contract that was delivered to them. How many people know where to find their existing policyholder statement? I say to consumers, ask your advisor for a copy of your policy. And even if it costs you $50, it does not matter. There are fabulous opportunities to review these contracts, remind clients not only what that policy includes, maybe there's a built-in critical illness benefit, maybe there's a built-in disability if a client needs access to the cash in a tax-free way. What are their beneficiary designations? When were they last updated? It is such a fabulous opportunity for the industry. You mentioned that at the beginning too. This isn't just for advisors. I think this is about consumers knowing this is a valuable asset. Do you know, Rohini, life insurance is the largest unmanaged asset a client has, and only 62%. LIMRA, which is my go-to place for research, LIMRA found that 62% of life insurance consumers today don't even know what they have in their insurance or why they have it. You
Well,
imagine if they hadn't had anyone call them in 30 years,
yeah, they
their
were.
needs were different 30 years ago, and nobody's addressing that holistic plan with that policy. Many of the new advisors coming in to look after some of these older contracts are just looking for new sales. They're not looking to understand the benefits in that contract. It's just the nature of the industry. It's no one's fault.
No,
It
it's no
is
one's
now
fault.
we are here. Now
Mhm.
we are here. Now, because the industry has been self-regulated since the beginning of its tenure in this country, it's time for all of us to come together and address this, because this promise to pay is built into every contract. Insurance companies issued those policies. They're a unilateral contract in favor of a policyholder, and we must change the perception that it also encompasses a pledge to service. Promise to pay, pledge to service. I want to encourage insurance companies and brokers and everybody in the industry to remember it's about the consumer first and elevating the client experience starting from today. Because, Rohini, we don't just have these orphan policyholders from many decades ago, we're creating them every day
Well, it's
because there is
interesting.
no ongoing service requirement.
And it's interesting that, you know, you sent me some stats about a So, a research done by Ernst and Young in 2014, a global consumer insurance survey, that released the statistics that 59% of Canadian consumers said they trust life insurance. And only 59% trust life
Life
insurance. So
insurance
what happened?
companies.
What happened to the others? That's
Well,
because, yeah,
yeah, that's
poor results
because,
point to serious customer relationship issues that have been created because of these orphan policies.
but wouldn't you agree, Rohini? You're an insurance professional too by background. You
Yeah.
understand the industry. You cared about your clients. I
Mhm.
can't think for a minute that an advisor out there that's retired or somebody hearing this when it ultimately gets out on the mainstream who says to themselves, I cared about my clients too. But at the end of the day, there's not enough time, or insurance companies merged, or the industry regulation compliance. There's always a reason why. But at the end of the day, isn't it important to understand that orphan policyholders are already believers in insurance? They're just
Yeah.
waiting for someone to appreciate them.
Yeah.
When I was given, you must have had the same experience. When I was given those 50 orphan policyholders within 6 months of being in the industry as a young professional, I called these people up and none of them were mad at me. Some of them, their advisor had been dead for 10 years. Nobody called them. And I called to say, it's important to us to appreciate you for all the years you've been paying premiums. And I'd like to arrange a time to meet with you to help you understand the values in the policy and make sure that all of your wishes based on today's needs are addressed. When is a good
Well,
time for us to meet? It's a
that's
simple phone call.
yeah. No, you're very right. I started off with orphan policies as well. And it's amazing, just like you, I started with 30 policies. And within those 30 policies, not only did I make good friends, but I increased my business. These policy or the holders or the orphans had been there for many years and nobody wanted them. So I also thought, what have I got? But like you, I built a very good relationship with them and grew my business from there. And that was with Metropolitan Life many years
Do
ago.
you know, I had 50 orphan policyholders that were as old as my father or my grandfather. Nobody wanted them, Rohini.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
wanted to be
I
introduced to people that could buy new insurance.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
interesting, think about the car business. Somebody buys a new car. Do you know they stay on top of you to make sure that you come in for service? They're
yes,
calling you all the time. Why are we not calling our clients once a year? Say, hi, it's me again. Time for your touch up. Time for just to make sure everything's okay since last year. Have you had a change in your situation? How is your family? How are things at work? Whatever it happens to be, you build. This is a relationship business, but it's also in a specific way a promise to pay fulfillment. And someone has to do it. Now, the insurance company has a choice. They can develop a best practices program. There's so much technology that can help them with that. But I think it's also about maintaining a new reputation. This is a way. You mentioned the statistic 59%, only 59% trust the insurance company. This is one of the reasons why, because they're not being serviced. But look at the opportunity the industry has to elevate its reputation. I
yeah,
can remember back when annual reports would come from insurance companies, and they would be written like a story. They would talk about, here's what we're going to do in the coming year for our policyholders. We're going to be introducing new products that meet with the tax changes. We're going to make sure that you're going to be okay. What happened to that? I'd like to see going back to that time is doable today.
yeah.
This is
I
something
totally
that can
agree.
be started today. And I want the message to be out there because I don't think policyholders really understand the value of what they have. They're afraid to have an expectation of service. They don't know who to call, especially, Imperial Life, Laurentian Life. Look at all
Yeah.
these companies that don't
And,
exist anymore. And the acquiring insurance company just put their name on the policy, and they, to try and find some help to understand what riders and features and benefits before they expire. Oh my goodness, just think of all the people who had options
no,
within their
you're very.
policy that were explained when they bought the policy,
Mhm.
and then they came and went, and
You
nobody
exactly.
could
You're
no
right.
the
Yeah.
insurance company doesn't send it.
No,
that was that was the pledge to serve that we took on when we became a licensed insurance professional.
no, exactly. Now, CLHIA has confirmed that in 2021, in Canada, there were 21 million individual life insurance policies. But the servicing of these contracts are now reaching a tipping point because we don't have enough advisors to service them. But yet, brokers are buying books of business.
Correct, correct. And this is the thing. They're buying books of business and they're what you call it in the industry, they're looking for new business.
Yeah.
There's nothing in their approach that's servicing the existing business to then find new business. They're doing it backwards.
Yeah.
And I have worked with advisors in the investment world, Rohini, as an example, for the last 30 years, and where the push is always to talk about investments. And I've trained them to understand that when you approach a client to understand their existing insurance, it will lead you to other things. But if you try to lead with the investments and then look for insurance business, the client thinks you're just trying to make a product sale. And they've told me that. That's where the lack of trust comes. They always feel like there's a hidden agenda to try and make another opportune sale. I have helped advisors to bring in significant amounts of assets where the client had never had a comprehensive review of their insurance. I was able to point out areas that they could take advantage of. For example, a client who'd been disabled for 2.5 years and had a waiver of premium rider in the contract that the previous investment advisor, didn't even notice, and in fact tried to cancel on two of his of his
Yeah.
7 policies, and I was able to get him premiums back.
Mhm.
Rohini,
I mean,
this
it's
is
amazing.
significant value for clients.
I think what advisors need to understand is enhancing trust should lead to greater profitability. So how do we reimagine the trust? Like just like you said, these are your phrases, right? So how do we create that trust again, and encourage the industry to create some sort of a method for advisors to create trust with their clients instead of just going there and selling a plan.
Mm, I think you will agree with me. There's several paths to success for this. If the industry was able to do it in the beginning, we are able to do it again today. And I think it has to start with training. I talked to a couple of advisors at this meeting yesterday, Rohini, at the chapter meeting, who said to me that, we don't get any training on existing insurance. We don't know what to say. It has to be a partnership with the insurance company to develop a best practices program, which I've written. There has to be, first of all, the insurance industry has to accept and understand that there's several layers of orphans. There are orphan policyholders that have come from an acquisition. So, for example, you were with, an
Metropolitan
insurance
Life.
company that
Yeah.
purchased another.
Yeah.
So we have to
Mutual Life.
start with those. Number
Hmm.
two, we have to look at advisors that are currently selling insurance and help them to develop an ongoing service commitment. What does that
Hmm.
look like? It has to be documented. There is a reason why letter in Canada, which is best practices guideline. All insurance companies have adopted this. If an individual advisor is going to sell an insurance contract to a client, they are required to submit this letter to the policyholder by the time the policy is delivered to explain that situation and why that product was sold. Why can't we have another bookend created as a best practices guideline, which should ultimately become regulation, to say that from this point of time in delivery on an annual basis, and some policyholders get a statement every year telling them what's in the policy. Many of them don't understand it and they never hear from an advisor. So that should be put in place. There's been lots of talk about it with the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, advocates, you name it. Everybody's talked about it,
But
but there's
nobody's
been
done
no
everything
action.
about it.
So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of understand the landscape. Every insurance company should identify what type of orphan policyholders do they have and develop a plan to do something about it. I can't stop talking about this, Rohini, because this is about consumers. This is about policyholders. We have a commitment to them.
I totally agree. And your points are very, very valid. And some of these policies, Rona, they're gold mines.
Mm.
Some of these plans, you don't get those kind of interest rates back on those plans. They're so old. They have so many features, like you said earlier, that we don't even have on newer plans anymore. You know how many
No, we don't.
times, yeah, you know how many times I saved a plan from being canceled by an advisor because I understood the plan and the advisor didn't, because they were in a rush to sell a new policy.
There is a significant tax change that went into effect, you probably recall, in
Yeah.
December of 1982.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to December of 2nd of 1982, an individual could put a huge amount of money into a cash value insurance
Oh, yeah.
policy,
Mm.
could tax shelter the growth in that policy, and there would be no limit to what they could put in. If they wanted to put $1 million into a whole life policy and
They
tax
could.
shelter it and the whole
Mm-hmm.
amount paid out tax free, they could.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
government got wind of this and they went, wait a minute here, this isn't an insurance policy. Where's the cost of the actual death benefit? We're going to put a cap on that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
there
remember
are
that.
clients out there that still have pre budget policies where advisors who don't understand them, who are looking for new business, say to them, Rohini, you've got 100,000 of cash in this policy. Why don't we cash it in, put it into an investment, and I'll sell you another term insurance policy for 1/10 the price,
Yeah.
not realizing that whole 100,000 under current tax legislation is subject to tax
Tax.
as
Mm-hmm.
interest income. Oh, the number
Exactly.
of times I've helped a client from an advisor trying to do that, not in the client's best interest.
No, absolutely not. Now, Rona, I want to ask you, what is some advice that you can give, and how can we start? Let's start with the step one. I think that this podcast is probably going to go to a series of podcasts where we're going to discuss this and probably create a method or a methodology. You've already put some programs in place, and you have some courses that you are going to be sharing
Yes,
with
yes,
the insurance companies or with advocates or CLHIA. I mean, whoever's going to be part of it, so that we can educate our new advisors or the current
yes.
advisors of plans. So, what is the advice that you can give now to a policyholder or a new advisor or a current broker? What should we do?
Wow, that's a fully loaded question. Let's start at step one.
Okay.
First of all, there needs to be an acceptance that this gap exists.
Yeah.
First and foremost, there needs to be, okay, I don't understand these older contracts. These are people whose life experience is much different than today. And we are going to help them to understand this asset and where it fits into their needs today. There has to be an acceptance in the industry. Now, where does that come from? Maybe it starts by educating the brokerage MGAs. I am also right now, Rohini, doing it with advisors, individual advisors who are coming to me saying, I want to make a difference. I have coached advisors, thousands of advisors across Canada. I have clients in other parts of Canada who have inherited a book of business from an elder advisor who's either
Session.
retired, who has introduced this advisor to their clients and has sought my consultancy services to help them understand the landscape of the orphan policyholders. Now, here's the thing. Any advisor watching who's in a position where they either have inherited an insurance book of business or they're looking to buy one must first look at what that book looks like. So we get a statement from the insurance companies in question, all of them. Because remember, insurance companies, most of them pay renewal commissions
Of course.
to the writing advisor. The
Yeah.
problem is the writing advisor is not in the business anymore
Isn't
or
anymore.
isn't even licensed. Now, that's for a future conversation, Rohini. That's not step one.
And I think it should be
Compensation,
addressed. But Rona, I think it should be
compensation is
addressed.
its one separate episode.
Yeah, I think so.
But I'll tell you that, first of all, we're going to say, you know what? We have an industry that's so valuable. The industry has contributed to communities. It has raised money for hospital expansions. It has been in the community. And I have found, as a rule over my career, the insurance industry has been quiet about some of those things. They're philanthropic interests, but they're there. And in fact, there's a lot of strength to some of the insurance companies today in terms of their assets and their real estate and a lot of the things that they have done to make sure that their investments are managed to ensure that that promise to pay will be fulfilled. Because in Canada, we have a regulatory system. Insurance companies are rated, and there is an expectation that they have enough assets in reserve to meet all of their obligations.
Oh, yeah,
So, do
definitely.
advisors understand that? Do they understand that a SURUS is there to protect every policyholder? We have to address the gap from the perspective of value. And then there is the next step is to understand how to build a communication approach, understand the features and benefits before you contact the client, and start by offering to help that client understand their policy. So it involves training, it involves coaching, it involves scripting, and I really feel that if more and more grassroots advisors, brokers, doesn't matter. We have a mixed blend of people today, don't we, Rohini? We don't have people joining the insurance industry as a career like I did.
Yeah.
There are individuals that are independent. We have, under the insurance regulations in British Columbia, somebody can drive a cab at night and sell insurance during the day or vice versa.
I
It's
just,
crazy.
I
What
just
happened to our
absolutely disagree with that. Totally disagree. For
oh
me, it was my
I am
career.
100% with you.
Yeah.
You
No,
cannot stay current in an
no,
industry that
it's a
has
business. You
increased
can,
its compliance. This is a business that requires a full-time attention span.
yeah, no,
And
definitely.
that's what will help the credibility. So I think that we have reached a turning point with the advent of AI as well, that every institution out there there's pressure to deliver on the client experience from an integral humanitarian perspective. People should not fear that. But at the
No,
end of the day,
absolutely.
we have to accept the good, the bad, and the ugly about our industry. And this isn't a very good thing. And no wonder the consumer is confused with this misinformation age we are in about where to turn.
So before we wind up now, I just want to let our listeners understand if you have an orphan policy or if you think you had a policy, and I say that because I know I saw the vault with Metropolitan Life where there were, I don't know how many thousands of unclaimed policies that were lying in a vault. Then family members don't know that their parents or grandparents had a policy. It'd be a good idea to get in touch with Rona and you could guide them. Now, Rona, where is the best place that you could be reached at?
Well, I can provide, I'm not sure, Rohini, how you would like to provide that, but there is a link, konnellyconsulting.ca, and it's KONNELLY, and then consulting, no space, .ca. And there is a link at the bottom. There's information about my advocacy work. There's a link at the bottom to send me an email. I am not in sales. I am here to help advisors to tap into this wealth of experience that these policyholders bring to the table, introduction to family members, helping them to preserve their estates for the next generation. This is what we are about, and we should celebrate that. No question is too crazy or too silly. If you have any information that you want to pass along, don't be afraid to say you don't know what to do. You don't know
Well,
who to call.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You could also get in touch with me at Step by Step Talks. If you message me, I will pass on your message to Rona. If you have any questions regarding a policy or what an orphan is, or even if there are any riders that you don't understand, I'm sure Rona will be able to help you through that and also get you in touch with a broker if you don't have one, so that at least your plans are being serviced. Or if you think that your parents or grandparents may have something, I would really encourage you to get in touch with Rona. So this is one of our first episodes, and we just wanted to touch on the beginning of what orphan policies are. We are going to be running a few episodes in the next few weeks, enhancing more as to what should be done and what Rona is looking into creating so that we can control this crisis. I think that's what I would say. Control the crisis of orphan policies in Canada. Rona, it was really good to have you today. We're going to see you frequently now in the next few months because we want to know more about what you're
Good.
doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to follow
Thank
your
you for
journey.
championing this, Rohini. This is
Oh no,
every
I'm
opportunity
great.
we can to
Yeah,
let policyholders know they can have a voice. Every
absolutely.
little way that we can help them navigate through a difficult situation, or maybe there's someone listening who found an old policy of their parents when they passed away and have no idea whether there's an
Exactly.
advisor connected to it. I mean, there's so many
Exactly.
stories out there. We want to hear yours. We want to
Yeah.
hear stories so that we can tell more people about this and bring solutions to the table. Thank you.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure, Arona, and I look forward to meeting you in January because I think that's when we're going to get together.
I would
Uh,
love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, like I said, please, if you like what we have said and talked about today, hit share, subscribe, and like. We will be posting this on LinkedIn, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere, wherever we can get the word out. If there are any managing directors or brokers out there who are listening to this and would like either Rona or I to come and talk to you in your branches, please feel free to reach out to us because we will come and talk about orphan policies and what can be done or help teach your advisors how they can service their plans. Right? Thank you, Rona. It was wonderful talking to you, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Perfect. Bye.